titled, "Why is ADHD Being Overlooked and Misdiagnosed in Older Adults?" This is based on an article that was published in the Expert Review of Neurotherapeutics, which is a peer-reviewed scientific journal, in the psychiatry space, and it's titled "The Diagnosis and Treatment of Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder (ADHD) in Older Adults." And as an older adult, when I saw that, it perked up my interest, and I read it, and it came out of the University of Sweden, Örebro in Sweden. And this research team reviewed over 100 different studies looking at the prevalence, diagnosis, health outcomes, and efficacy and safety of treatment protocols for older adults with ADHD. Now, you see, here's the problem. When you get to be over 60, you're going to find that your physician or your psychiatrist or whatever is going to be very, very reluctant to give you stimulant medications. Ritalin, Dexedrine, methamphetamine, Adderall, which is kind of Dex and meth combined. These drugs have as a side effect, not only can they increase your focus, but they also increase your blood pressure. And for older people, people over 50, over 60 in particular, and particularly men, but generally speaking, for people over that age, that can be a dangerous thing. It increases the risk of heart attack and stroke and other cardiovascular conditions. So what do you do? One of the things that I've learned, and first of all, I've discovered that as I've aged, I've gotten more sensitive to stimulant medications, including coffee. Sean this morning gave me a quarter cup of her coffee. She made a little cup of coffee herself. We've got a little 1-cup coffee maker. She gives me a quarter of her cup, and then I add water to it and set it on a little Mr. Coffee heating pad here, and it jacks me up. I mean, I've drank half of her quarter cup, and I'm speeding, and I can tell. That was not the case 30 years ago. 30 years ago, if I wanted to get that level of stimulation, I would have to drink a cup and a half of coffee. So number one, and I've heard this from a lot of other people, as they age, they become more sensitive to all kinds of drugs. And so number one, be careful. Number two, if you want to go stimulant medication, try coffee first. Number three, the most important thing, and this is something that I write about in this article, "Why is ADHD Being Overlooked and Misdiagnosed in Older Adults?" that's over on our website, hunterinAfarmersworld.com, is that I remember this is 1994 or 1993, one or the other. I think it was 94 that Time magazine did a cover story that included an article about my hunter-farmer hypothesis on ADHD. In fact, it was titled "Hail the Hyperactive Hunter." And Wilson Harrell was the publisher of Inc. magazine at the time. And I owned an ad agency in Atlanta at the time, and Chandler McDonald, Stout, Schneiderman, and Poe. And I was sitting in my office, and this guy comes in, tall, erect posture. He was in his 70s. He was 74 at the time. And gray hair. He comes in and throws down my book. At that time it was called ADD, A Different Perception. He tosses it down on my desk, and he says, "You wrote a book about me." And he went on to write his own book, Wilson Harrell, and the title of it is, For Entrepreneurs Only, Success Strategy for Anyone Starting or Growing a Business. And in that book, he quotes me at some length. He says, "For the past decade, I've wrestled with a very provocative question: are entrepreneurs born or made? Over and over, the question is asked of me when I address entrepreneurs." And he said, he says, "My answer has been that they're made," but he says, "I've never been satisfied with that conclusion." And he says, "Then I met Thom Hartmann and read his book, Attention Deficit Disorder, A Different Perception, which boggled my mind, as it will yours. If you're an entrepreneur, particularly if you have children, you must read Thom's book. If you want to know whether you're born an entrepreneur, read the book and find out. It's incredible reading for anyone." And he goes on to kind of summarize my hypothesis. And this, the bottom line here is that there are a lot of professions, even in retirement, that are ideally suited for hunters, for people with ADHD. High stimulation things, whether it's getting involved in politics, we're seeing an awful lot of that, getting out in the world, getting engaged, obviously in business, in the business world, being an entrepreneur, running businesses, things like that, being, in sales and whatnot. So anyhow, just, know who you are and what you can do, and build on those strengths is the bottom line. You can read all about it over at hunterinAfarmersworld.com. hunterinAfarmersworld.com.